It started with a notice I wasn't supposed to see, taped to my door like a threat. My landlord thought I'd panic, pack up, and disappear. What he didn't know was that I had been recording everything from the start. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I first saw the paper taped to my door. At first, I thought it was just one of those building notices, maybe a plumbing shutdown or pest control. But as I got closer, I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't a notice to inform me. It was a notice to remove me. Immediate notice to vacate. That's what it said at the top in bold, aggressive letters. No warning, no explanation. Just a printed threat stuck to the door of the apartment I'd lived in for over 3 years. I stood there, keys in my hand, grocery bag hanging off my arm, just staring at it. My mind scrambled for answers. I wasn't behind on rent. I didn't throw loud parties. I barely even had visitors. I lived alone, worked from home, and mostly kept to myself. So why was I being kicked out? The hallway felt colder all of a sudden. I took the paper inside and sat on the edge of my bed, reading every word twice. It didn't make sense. No court stamp. No official signature, just typed lines that sounded like legal jargon but didn't look legal. For a while I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't meant for me, but deep down I knew something was off. My landlord, Greg, had been acting strange lately, ignoring repairs, getting short with me over text, and hinting that he wanted to renovate the building. I didn't think much of it then, but now it felt calculated. That night I barely slept. I kept imagining myself being thrown out with nowhere to go. I don't have family nearby. My savings weren't great, and the thought of dealing with lawyers and courtrooms made my stomach twist. But even through the panic, something inside me snapped into focus. This wasn't right, and I wasn't going to walk away just because someone expected me to. I needed to find out what my rights were. I needed to be smart about this. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to confront Greg and ask him directly. Not with anger, just with questions. Because if he thought he could scare me into leaving quietly, he was wrong. I waited until late morning before heading to Greg's office. I figured he'd be there, sitting behind that cluttered old desk he never cleaned. The building manager's office was just off the lobby, small, dim, and always smelling faintly of cigarette smoke. I knocked once and stepped inside. He didn't even look up, just grunted, eyes glued to his phone. "Hey, Greg," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I found a notice taped to my door yesterday. Says I need to vacate immediately." That got his attention. He set his phone down and leaned back in his chair like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Yeah," he said casually. "Building S going through renovations. We need the unit." "But I'm not behind on rent," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no written warning, no legal notice, just that paper. Greg shrugged. "I don't need a reason. Month-to-month lease, right? I'm giving you a heads up." "But that's not what the paper says," I replied. "It says immediate, no 30 days, no process." His tone changed quickly. "Look, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Pack up and go. You'll be out by the weekend." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just careless. It was intentional. He knew what he was doing. He was counting on me not knowing my rights. "Greg," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I don't want trouble, but this isn't legal." His face tightened. "You want to fight me on this? Be my guest, but it won't end well for you." I left the office with my heart pounding. That fake confidence he had, it wasn't just arrogance. It was a tactic. He thought if he acted like he had the power, I'd believe it. Maybe most people would, but I'm not most people, not anymore. I sat in my apartment that evening and stared at the walls. I'd lived there for years. Every corner of that place held a memory, even if they were quiet ones. I wasn't ready to let someone shove me out without cause. That night, I opened my laptop and typed in, "Can a landlord evict you without a court order?" As I started to scroll, a thought formed, quiet but clear. If he wants to play games, I'll play smarter. I thought maybe Greg would back off after our conversation, but I was wrong. Just 2 days later, the hot water in my apartment stopped working. No warning, no explanation. I emailed Greg and texted him, but got no reply. That night I took an ice-cold shower and shivered under 3 blankets. I told myself maybe it was just bad timing. But the next day, the hallway lights on my floor went out completely. The whole corridor felt like a cave. And then it got worse. Loud banging started in the middle of the night, pipes being hit, strange knocks on the walls. Once I opened my front door at 3 a.m. only to find no one there, just silence. and a sinking feeling in my chest. Greg was trying to make me uncomfortable. He didn't want to evict me through the legal route. He wanted to push me to leave on my own, and I'll admit for a moment I almost did. The stress was eating at me. I couldn't sleep properly. Every sound made me jump. I began to dread going home, and I hated that. It was my home. But every time I felt like giving in, I reminded myself this wasn't legal, and I wasn't powerless. So I started documenting everything. Every repair he ignored, every text he left unread, every time the building's maintenance mysteriously skipped my unit. I kept a notebook, took photos, and even downloaded a voice recording app on my phone. I started recording my conversations with him, quietly, calmly, without warning. Not to trap him, but to protect myself. Because the more I looked into tenant laws, the more I realized how common this was, and how easily landlords got away with it when tenants didn't fight back. One evening, as I was recording notes on my phone, I caught something strange outside my door, a scraping sound. I peeked through the peephole. A man I didn't recognize was crouched down, fiddling with something near my doorknob. I snapped a photo through the peephole and knocked hard on the door from the inside. He ran off without a word. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just about pushing me out. Greg was trying to scare me, but fear only works when you let it sink in. And I had reached my limit. The more pressure he put on me, the more determined I became. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building a case. By the end of that week, I stopped waiting for things to get better. I knew they wouldn't, not on their own. Greg had made up his mind. I was just a problem he wanted to clear out of his building. But what he didn't know was that the pressure he kept applying had forced me to do something I should have done a long time ago, understand my rights and protect myself. I started researching every evening, tenant protection laws, housing codes, local ordinances. I discovered that in my city, landlords were required to give a written 30-day notice and go through court to evict a tenant legally, even on a month-to-month lease. More importantly, I found out that things like cutting off hot water, failing to make repairs, and harassing tenants were all considered forms of illegal eviction. And I had evidence of every single one. One night, I organized all my notes, photos, audio recordings, and videos into folders on my laptop. Then I backed it all up to a cloud drive, just in case. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but it felt good, like I was finally taking control. That same night, I found the contact info for a local tenant advocacy group. I sent them a long email explaining everything, every violation, every scare tactic, every ignored message. I attached files, timestamps, and screenshots. I didn't expect a fast response, but they called me the next morning. A woman named Carla picked up. She listened quietly as I explained my story again, this time over the phone. When I was done, there was a short silence before she said, "You've got a solid case. He's violating multiple laws. You're not alone in this." Those words hit me harder than I expected. You're not alone. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd felt, like it was just me against this man, this building, this growing fear. But suddenly I had people backing me. People who knew the law, people who'd seen landlords like Greg before. Carla offered to help me file an official complaint and connect me with legal aid. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt power. Greg thought he had the upper hand, that I'd quietly fold under pressure. But the game was changing now. And this time I wasn't playing defense. Things quieted down for a few days after I contacted the tenant group. No strange noises, no late-night pounding, no new surprise issues. For a moment, I thought maybe Greg had figured out I wasn't backing down and decided to ease off. But then he crossed a line I never saw coming. I came home from work on a Thursday evening. My apartment door was unlocked. I froze. I knew I'd locked it. I always did. My stomach dropped as I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. Everything looked normal, nothing missing, no mess, but something felt off. A chair was out of place. A drawer in the kitchen wasn't fully shut. My toothbrush had moved. Someone had been inside. I backed out of the apartment, heart hammering in my chest. I called the police, hands shaking as I tried to explain. I knew I sounded uncertain, paranoid even, but I couldn't ignore the feeling. 2 officers showed up within 30 minutes. They checked the place, found no sign of forced entry, and took my statement. I told them about the eviction threats, the harassment, everything. They nodded sympathetically but said without evidence of theft or damage, there wasn't much they could do. "Change your locks," one of them said before leaving, "and keep a log of anything suspicious." That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about how far Greg was willing to go, and how much worse it could have been. If I hadn't come home when I did, would he have planted something? Or worse? The next morning, I installed a hidden camera inside my apartment. I also bought a small motion sensor for the front door. If anyone tried to get in again, I'd know instantly. I was done being passive, done hoping he'd stop. Now I wanted proof, the kind no one could deny. I also emailed Carla from the tenant group, explaining everything that happened. She responded quickly, telling me this was now beyond a civil matter. It could be criminal trespassing. She helped me draft a formal complaint, which we plan to send directly to the city's housing authority and a legal clinic handling landlord abuse cases. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was transforming, turning into something sharper, more focused. Greg thought I was alone and scared. But now I had allies. And more importantly, I had a plan. 3 nights after I installed the hidden camera, I came home to the notification I'd been dreading, but also hoping for. Motion detected, 2:13 a.m. I locked the door behind me, dropped my bag, and opened the footage on my phone with trembling fingers. The clip started in total silence. The apartment was dark still. Then I saw it. My front door creaked open slowly. A tall figure stepped inside. It was Greg. He didn't say anything. He didn't call out or knock. He just walked in like he owned the place, shining a flashlight around my living room. I watched, stunned, as he moved toward my bookshelf, glanced over the kitchen counter, then paused at my bedroom door. He didn't enter the bedroom, just stood there for a few seconds. Then, as quietly as he came, he left. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a full invasion of privacy. My home, my space, violated, and I had it all on camera. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I took the footage straight to Carla at the tenant group's office. Her face darkened as she watched it. "This is huge," she said. "This changes everything." We immediately filed a police report for trespassing and unlawful entry. Carla also sent the video to the legal aid clinic, who agreed to take on my case formally. They told me we could file for a restraining order and pursue a civil case for damages. On top of that, the footage would strengthen the complaint to the housing authority. Greg could be fined, even lose his license as a landlord. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a clear path forward. Not just surviving, but winning. Still, that night, I kept the lights on. I slept with my phone in hand, every creak of the building setting me on edge. Knowing he had crossed that boundary, it changed something in me. The fear hadn't left completely, but now it lived beside something else: resolve. He thought he could scare me out. But what he didn't know was, every time he crossed a line, he handed me the tools to fight him. The video wasn't just proof, it was power. And the moment I hit play in that lawyer's office, I took the first real step toward ending this. I didn't expect to see Greg again so soon, especially not in broad daylight. But 2 days after I filed the police report and handed over the footage, he showed up, brazen as ever. I was walking up the front steps of the building when I saw him standing outside the entrance, arms crossed, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting. My heart rate spiked, but I didn't stop. "Hey," he called out, straightening up. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. I reached for my keys. "I know what you're doing," he continued, voice sharper now. "You think you're smart, recording me, running to lawyers." I turned to face him. "I'm protecting myself. That's what smart people do." His face twitched just slightly. I could see the anger simmering behind his fake calm. "You want to play hardball, huh?" he said, stepping closer. "You think the city cares about some punk with a phone and a bad attitude?" I took a step back, pulled my phone from my pocket, and hit the record button right in front of him. "You're being recorded right now." That made him pause. He blinked, then let out a dry laugh. "You think this scares me?" "No," I said, "but it documents you, that's enough." He stared at me for a long second. I couldn't tell if he was going to explode or walk away. Eventually, he muttered something under his breath and stormed off, disappearing down the sidewalk. I stood there for a while trying to calm my nerves. My hands were shaking. My throat was dry. I wanted to believe I was brave, but the fear was still there, buzzing just beneath the surface. Later that day, I sent the new video to Carla and the legal team. They added it to the file. We were building a case brick by brick, and now we had footage of him threatening me in person. The confrontation changed something, not just in Greg, but in me. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was standing up, speaking clearly, drawing a line. Greg thought intimidation would break me, that I'd fold if he pressed hard enough. But all he did was prove I was right to fight back. And this time the law was on my side. The court date arrived faster than I expected. It was a rainy Monday morning, and I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting my collar, trying to look more confident than I felt. Carla met me at the courthouse steps, along with a young lawyer from the tenant group's legal clinic named Maya. She had reviewed all the footage, the text logs, the police reports, everything. She reassured me we had a solid case. I nodded, but my stomach felt like it was full of wet cement. Greg showed up late. He walked in like he owned the place. No surprise there, and didn't even glance in my direction. His lawyer was older, looked bored, like this was just another easy win on a long list of shady landlord cases. But then we started showing the videos. First, the illegal entry. The judge leaned forward. Then the footage of Greg standing inside my apartment, flashlight in hand, pausing by my bedroom door. You could hear a pin drop. Next came the clip of him threatening me on the sidewalk. By the time we finished presenting our evidence, Greg didn't look so smug anymore. His lawyer asked for a short recess to review the materials. But the damage was done. The truth was on record. I sat there still shaking slightly as the judge addressed the courtroom. He didn't mince words, called the landlord's behavior deeply troubling, unlawful, and a clear abuse of power. He issued a restraining order against Greg and ordered an investigation by the city's housing authority. On top of that, Greg was fined and instructed to pay for my legal fees. The judge even suggested I consider a civil lawsuit for emotional distress. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Outside the courtroom, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for weeks. Carla hugged me, and even Maya, usually so composed, gave me a big, relieved smile. I'd won, but more than that, I'd been heard, seen, respected. All the fear, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, it hadn't been for nothing. I had stood my ground against someone who thought I was powerless, and I had come out stronger. Greg walked past me as he left the building, eyes down, shoulders hunched. This time, he was the one who didn't say a word. In that silence, it was everything. The days after the court hearing felt surreal. I kept replaying the judge's words in my mind like a protective mantra. You stood your ground, you were heard, you won. But winning didn't erase everything. I still felt the weight of what I'd been through, the constant stress, the feeling that my home wasn't truly mine until that moment. It took time to relax the grip I'd been holding on my phone, constantly checking for notifications, watching for any sign Greg might try something new. Carla and the tenant group stayed by my side. They helped me connect with other tenants in the building who had their own stories. Turns out, Greg's harassment wasn't just aimed at me. Several people had faced similar issues: illegal entry, late rent threats, even shutting off utilities to force people out. Hearing those stories made me realize how many others were suffering quietly. It also made me grateful I had fought back. My videos, my records, they could help others too. Carla encouraged me to share my experience with local tenant rights groups and community meetings. At first, I hesitated. I'm not someone who likes being in the spotlight. But slowly, I realized that speaking up could give others courage. That shift, turning fear into action, felt like the biggest victory of all. I moved to a new apartment shortly after the ruling, finally free from Greg's shadow. It was smaller and simpler, but it was mine. No hidden cameras needed, just peace. Looking back, I know I wasn't just fighting for a place to live. I was fighting for respect, for dignity, for the right to feel safe. And I learned something else, too. Sometimes standing up means being brave enough to document the truth, to ask for help, and to believe that even when it feels impossible, you are not alone. The man who tried to evict me illegally never expected the fight I was ready to bring. But I wasn't just his tenant. I was someone with a voice, and I used it. Moving into my new apartment felt like stepping into a fresh chapter. No creaks in the floor, no suspicious knocks in the middle of the night. Just silence, and a sense of safety I hadn't felt in months. The experience with Greg had changed me in ways I didn't expect. I was no longer just a guy trying to keep a roof over his head. I was someone who had faced intimidation head-on and refused to back down. That strength, quiet but fierce, had become a part of me. I started volunteering with the tenant rights group Carla had connected me to. Sharing my story, helping others document their struggles, and offering support felt like a new purpose. It gave me a sense of belonging and reminded me that even when things seem darkest, there's a way forward. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Greg, not with fear anymore, but with a strange kind of closure. He underestimated me, and that mistake cost him everything. I learned that power doesn't always come from strength or status. It comes from courage, truth, and the will to fight for what's right. Life isn't perfect. I still have worries, bills to pay, and uncertainties about the future. But this time I'm ready to face whatever comes with eyes wide open and a heart that won't be broken. I know now that being pushed to the edge isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning, the moment when you find out how strong you really are. And for me, that moment came when I hit record.